Welcome to the free agency week edition of Sharing Sox. I'm Southside Sox duty geezer Leigh Allan. With me, my son and West Coast correspondent Will. And I guess most interesting things that have happened have just been people listing off what they think is going to happen more than anything
Yes.
else. The White Sox and there are all fans have to give a great thank you to AJ Pollock for reasons I don't comprehend. It may be, he lives in Arizona. Maybe he's just hoping to get a West Coast team or
I've
somebody near
I've
home.
got multiple theories here with Pollock. One theory being he's done. He's been injury plagued his entire career. His career trajectory was very
So
different
he was
from how
very
it
well.
has been.
Did very well this year. He
He was
didn't have any
fine, yeah,
last year.
yeah. Oh, injury wise for sure.
Yeah.
So it's possible because, at the very beginning of the year, he had the week off for paternity leave, um, or a couple weeks. So it's possible with the new kid and having a bunch of injuries, being in his mid 30s, he's taking the buyout, calling it quits. Theory number one. Theory number two, he hated playing for the White Sox so much that he just wanted out, and it was more valuable for him to just get out of that franchise for less
I,
money.
with all of the thing, there's these things still swirling around about the horrible clubhouse. Uh, Nobody's up there and going, that's the guy. I can't be around him, or those two guys, I can't be around them. Uh, but
And
there's
then
just
theory
lots
three,
of stuff about it's not a
yeah.
good place to be.
Theory three is he took the buyout, which was what, 5 million?
Yes,
Yeah, took the $5 million buyout. His agent has a lead on like a 2 year, $9.5 million deal or
that's
something
that's
like that.
that's my best guess. I think he's going to get a 2 year, no more than 10. So he's
For sure.
apparently just playing basically for free the second year because he could have gotten the extra 8 this time, and he has a chance of playing nearer home with a new baby. Uh, I had
Maybe.
looked up just in case
Huh.
one of those deals being near the wife's home. Well, the wife's Australian.
Oh.
So, and grew up born in Australia and grew up in England. So I don't think that's a factor there. Although maybe Arizona's halfway between living in Australia.
Well, I definitely think that is the most likely scenario is that they have a lead on a 2 year deal. I mean, I think he's either trying to get out of baseball or he's trying to stay in baseball a little longer, even if it means getting less money next year. But I also think theory two of clubhouse environment um, is very, very, very possible. Uh,
Yeah.
AJ is not, he's not booming with personality. So it's possible that, in a very, very tense clubhouse environment, he was an odd man out and doesn't want to be a part of that culture, which I do think that culture is about to radically shift under Griffall. Um, but yeah, I mean, whatever motivated him not taking that option, I would say there were a bunch of not surprising option pickups by mediocre players this week. He was certainly on the list of players we expected to take the option, and he did not. He took the $5 million to not play in Chicago. Uh,
Not necessarily in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago.
Drew on the south side of Chicago.
Because one of our other free agents is being listed as quite possibly just moving a couple miles up the red line.
But the good thing is, it really helps the White Sox to free up that money and free up that space. And I don't know why he made the decision he made. My guess is we will find out. But yeah, bye AJ. Thanks. Honestly, I didn't dislike you as a White Sox player. I thought you were okay. I I probably wouldn't have thought you were okay, except we got you in a trade with Craig Kimbrell. Uh, and
Right.
so I was just constantly comparing you to if we had still kept Craig Kimbrell. And I do think we very, very much so got the better end of that deal, even with Pollock having sort of a middling season. Um, But there
Yeah,
were times
middling
where he
poor.
was the only outfielder out there who had played outfield before. So,
Yeah, he did
uh,
have that going for him.
even though he
Uh,
has a terrible arm, but
Now,
yeah,
I know both of us have looked through a lot of the prediction lists of where free agents will go, including the entire 50-man list on MLB trade rumors, which is one of my favorite sites to go to for that kind of thing.
full
However,
disclosure,
I
full
want,
disclosure, I only actually read the first 40 because the names started getting so vague to me that
well, then you missed number 48. That was a possible White Sox
well,
move.
I can't wait to hear about it.
But before we get to that, the headline as we go on, we're recording Saturday around noon, uh, Central Time, on MLB trade rumors, was that the White Sox are interested in Sean Murphy. Now, I would guess there are probably 25 teams that are interested in Sean Murphy because he's an excellent offensive and defensive catcher with years of team control left. Uh, why Oakland would trade it to the White Sox instead of a team that has deep minor leagues farm system from them to get lots of cheap labor from, I don't know. And it's interesting, even though on that they're interested,
Yeah,
because a year from now, absolutely, they're stuck with Yasmani Grandal. They are stuck with him. It's $18 million. Nobody's taking him unless you toss in 15 million of it. And then you've got
maybe more.
Sevy. Sevy's a perfectly adequate backup. Uh,
Yeah,
and possibly could be an adequate starter.
this makes no sense to me. I mean, the one thing I'll say is here on Southside Sox, there's a writer who will occasionally do a piece about the biggest beefcakes in Major League Baseball and on the White Sox in particular. Sean Murphy, famously large keister, uh, would fit in probably at the top of a beefcake ranking in Chicago. I'm not saying he read that and is aspiring to be in the next beefcake rankings, but it is legitimately the only reason I can understand any of this happening. It makes no sense to me. Yeah, the article said the White Sox are interested in Sean Murphy, and I would assume really everybody's interested in Sean Murphy
I
outside of
think so.
three teams, maybe. And I have no clue what we could give them for Murphy. I have no clue what we would do with guys that we have if we got Murphy.
Yeah, unless you're going to follow up eating $15 million of Keuchel in 2022 with eating $18 million of Grandal in 2023. And I got to get this in. I have never been a Yasmani Grandal fan, even when he was good. Even in 2021, when he was a 155 OPS plus, and that's because he's a whiner, and I don't like whiners. He was so used to getting every call when he's at the plate in his favor, and what's happening that once you get that reputation of being really good at the strike zone, uh, people like Grandal and Carlos Santana get the benefit all the time. But he was so used to getting every call that a ball would come right down the middle, and the umpire would call it a strike, and he'd whine and moan and stuff. And I said, "Get off it! Play the damn game." Um,
Yeah, I mean we're stuck with Grandal. I mean it is possible that they are looking at just eating the Grandal money because what do you can't really play him. I mean you can, but he's a terrible, terrible catcher now. I mean he's just and it's not
yeah,
necessarily his fault. He's just got nothing left in his knees. And he's terrible at the plate. He's really been a bad hitter for quite some time, but he's also lost his plate discipline in a lot of ways. And the power is just gone. And with a guy like him,
and because of the
his
knees.
power's gone. Exactly. Yeah, power's legs. And, with a guy like him, if power's gone and you're not, but I mean, if power's gone, they just throw you strikes now. If your whole thing was you're great at taking pitches, you know where the strike zone is, your on base percentage is going to be great, even though your batting average is terrible. the only reason they don't throw the ball down the middle is because you can hit it 450 feet. Well, if you can only hit it 350 feet now, they're going to throw the ball right down the middle. And it doesn't matter how good you are at taking walks. If the ball's down the middle, generally they're going to call it a strike. If Angel Hernandez isn't behind the plate, it's a strike. So I think it's possible that they are just saying, hey, we got to eat this money. We got to move on from Grandal. We can't, I've always been a huge proponent of just because you're paying a guy doesn't mean you're playing a guy. Obviously, that's easy to say when it's not your money. But I feel that way across all sports. When the NBA has a starter who's making 22 mil and is terrible, but they still play him, Russell Westbrook. It happens, but I would certainly be I'm interested in Sean Murphy as well. I'll go on the record.
Yeah,
right
I love
here.
that. Yeah, great. Let's bring him on. My guess, what would you trade if you were Oakland? What would you take from the White Sox? And you're going to have much better offers elsewhere, including Houston. I would think if Houston doesn't sign Wilson Contreras, they're going to be all in on, even with Jim Click gone. And incidentally, that would have been the greatest pickup of the offseason if we could get Jim Click and send Rick Hahn to Houston. It's
maybe we still
man-for-man trade.
Maybe we still can get him.
I mean, Hahn would be great in Houston because he's got no guts, no nothing. He won't talk back to the owner about anything. He'll just sit there and suck it up and say, "Do it to me again, please." He should go to Houston. We should get Click, who's actually got a working brain and willing to stand up for himself. And everything would be great.
That would be absolutely ideal. I would love that. But in terms of us actually making a trade for Sean Murphy, who has incredible value because of his contract situation,
and his skill,
and his skill, he's very solid. With catchers, you never know when that's gonna go.
He's still very young.
But he's young. He's young. He's under team control. There is not a trade I can think of that isn't goofy where Oakland would take it in terms of taking young talent from us. I mean, you could lose Andrew Vaughn.
I was thinking Sebi plus Sheets plus Berger. They've got a third base problem. Although he's a third base problem, he can't catch the ball.
Exactly.
Plus certainly Colas. I mean, the first thing the last word is Colas.
Right.
And if it's not those, then it would be Sebi because they need a catcher back and Vaughn.
Is there any world where we send Sheets, Vaughn, and Grandal and we pay 16 of the 18 million or something like that? Because maybe Oakland is fine with Grandal for a year if we're paying for it, because they're certainly not going to be competitive next year. They're
years away.
Rebuild. Yeah. It's not necessarily valuable for them to have Grandal, but if we would pay for Grandal to play there, maybe, but we would have to also really sweeten that pot. And that means you're giving up Colas, or you're giving up Vaughn, or you're giving up Colas and Vaughn. And obviously,
Montgomery, or that's kind of the trio. And frankly, I'm not as enamored of Andrew Vaughn as most of the rest of them. I'm not going, oh gosh, he's terrible, let's get rid of him, by any means. But his second half of last season was scary. I think his OPS was just a little over 600. And that's 2 years in a row where he just kind of wore out. And this time he wore out sooner. 2021, you figure, kid's never played this many games before. He had no minor league because of the situation in 2020. No wonder he wore out. That's bound to happen. You go from playing 60 or 70 college games to 162 programs. Got to wear it out. Well, that wasn't the excuse in 2022, and he really wore down.
But he was playing for a team that
he's playing left field,
right,
and that depresses him. And maybe that's true, but why didn't it depress him in the first half of the season? He was just as terrible in left field then. I still want Vaughn, and I still think he's going to be very good. I don't have that superstar vibe about him that some fans do.
Agreed. I don't anticipate a world where Vaughn is an elite player at any point. But I do actually think Vaughn could be an extremely consistent player for 10 years or so. He's got the fundamentals, and he's got the natural ability. He doesn't have the fundamentals, but everything can change. I hate to be so positive about the White Sox in 2023, but I actually am. And I'm in such a different boat about this managerial thing than the first day when they announced the hire.
Oh yeah, for
I,
sure.
I've got faith in this guy. And I got faith in what he's going to do, particularly with the young players. And I think you could see if Vaughn is not in left field. I don't think there's any world where Vaughn becomes a good outfielder. I just
No, no, it has to be a
there's
first base.
there's just
Has
no
to be.
world for that. It has to be first base or DH on any given day. But I think with a great coach, and I think it's possible this guy will be a great coach for young players. I do think Vaughn is potentially a guy you really want to have around and have in your lineup for years to come, because obviously we're not going to keep Abreu. He's done as a member of the White Sox. We won't have the money, whether we want to keep him or not. He's not going to take a $10 million pay cut to play
Yeah,
for us.
predictions on him are around the 2-year 35, 2-year 40 range, depending
Yeah,
on which prediction you
we're
read.
never going to do that when we have 12 guys who can only exist at first base, essentially. We do need to take our break here. When we come back, we will talk about those MLB trade rumors, top 50 projections, including one of the few, very few, they had the White Sox in on. It was really bleak. Uh, Montero, who already signed with Houston this morning.
Yeah, so
So
the White Sox listed on none of the top 20, but
correct.
six all told, one of whom was Rafael Montero, and we know that's gone. That didn't
Yeah.
make sense
So
anyway. I'm not sure why you want to spend
correct. Correct.
even more on your bullpen.
But hang in there, and we will be right back here on Sharing Socks. Welcome back to Sharing Socks. We discussed the mysterious Sean Murphy interest, as well as AJ Pollock doing us the favor of the century. But let's talk about the MLB trade rumors. Right before the break, we mentioned that Montero was one of the few that the White Sox were theoretically in on. I think it was just totally them guessing. He re-signed with Houston today. I'm really actually happy about that. I don't see a world where giving Montero $10 million a year as a member of the White Sox makes any sense with our bullpen that already costs $85 trillion a season. But who else? Who else did the?
Well, and we should point out how they do it. They have four guys, and each of the guys makes a prediction for each of the guys on their top 50. First of all, they get together to arrange the top 50, and then each one puts in where they think the guy will go. So, and they could agree or they could disagree. I think they mostly agree on Aaron Judge on down. So
Yeah.
obviously Judge is number one. The four shortstops are next. They listed, I think they had Correa at the top of the four, but the four are all kind of together.
Yeah.
These four great shortstops, which would be for the White Sox, would be incredible to get
I
one of
know.
those.
I know. You
Move
want
Tim Anderson to second, and all of a sudden you are a World Series contender, but it's not going to happen.
You want Dansby Swanson so bad, and I think they were all predicting he's going to the Cubs, which is extra brutal.
One of them will go to the Cubs. Correa will, or Swanson will, or probably not Turner or Bogarts, but possible. But then we get to, and it's interesting, the next player after that of their top 50 is a familiar name in town, Carlos Rodon. Another one that I looked at, Fangraphs had Rodon as the number 3 pitcher behind DeGrom and Verlander, but not necessarily in how much you get, because Verlander is very unlikely to be more than 2 years anyway. But they have Rodon 5 years, 140 million. Most of the ones I've seen have been 5, 120, but it'd be anywhere from there on up. He ain't coming back to the South Side for sure.
No way. No way.
They have Jose Abreu at number 19 2 years and 40 million, and have him ahead of Anthony Rizzo, which would be the biggest competition there because Rizzo is left-handed, about the same age, and is showing the past year anyway more power, even though he only hit 220, 225, something like that, but he put it out of the park a lot. But the first name that comes up with the White Sox as a possibility is their number 21 listing, which is Noah Syndergaard, who is no longer Thor. He's kind of a minor Norse deity or something of this type, but was a very serviceable pitcher in this last year for Mets and Phillies. For the Phillies at the end too, they have a 356, and could be the Giants, could be Toronto, could be the Cubs, could be the White Sox. That's a good pickup. I mean, if they got him, that's a good pickup. Remember, they're
Well,
losing Cueto.
depends how much you're going to spend on him though, because Syndergaard just to me feels like a really classic White Sox bad signing. I like
Older guy for
Syndergaard.
fade.
Yeah, I like Syndergaard. I think that he does still have something to offer as a pitcher, but I also could see Noah Syndergaard as one of those guys who comes out next year and has an ERA around 5.5. He doesn't have that overwhelming power that he used to have. He's not really a finesse pitcher. He had a pretty good season, no doubt about it. He filled in innings and somewhat and got the job done. But I have such fears with him of the White Sox, giving him a decent sized chunk of dollars next year and then just coming out and rocking that 5 ERA, 5.5 ERA. This is not an exciting pickup. I'm actually surprised that he is ranked as high as 21. Just because he's either hurt or he's falling off, and you kind of got to decide which one you're willing to risk there.
Next, the next is number 29, Rafael Montero, who is gone. He's back with the Astros and that incredible bullpen. And next, and I think this one is realistic. Q, one of my favorite players ever on the White Sox, Jose Quintana. They projected 2 years, 24 million. That's a White Sox budget area. Had a tremendous 2022, 293 ERA, 165 innings. I mean, that's pitching. They have White Sox, Mets, Royals, and Tigers. Now that's 4 different guys making 4 different predictions. One of them, there's no player where 2 guys thought the White Sox would get. None on the whole list.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you don't have money to work with and you don't have trade chips and you don't have anything. Yeah.
Next, we get the first position player, number 37, Brandon Drury, who was sort of Leury Garcia with talent.
Yeah.
A little more a second baseman than anything, but basically he's the Swiss Army knife type player.
So that's definitely who we're signing, by the way.
He had a 2.6 WAR season this year, which is great,
Yeah.
His career WAR is 2.
So he's had a good year.
One really, really good season. And the predictions there are White Sox, Angels, Marlins, and Brewers. And 2 years and 18 million. I'm not feeling Brandon Drury. We got enough of these guys that really don't know where they want to play.
Which is exactly why I'm saying we're gonna have
probably end up with it. I mean, it's a popular thing these days. Teams like those who have defensive flexibility, and goodness knows he could then go into a corner outfield slot if needed. So there's that going. Next, at number 40, a pure second baseman, John Segura, who
yeah.
At 2 years and 18 million, he has been getting 14.5 million for the last. He's had a 4-year, $58 million contract with the Phillies. They 4 different predictions are back to the Phils, the Rockies, one that I wrote down. Seattle. I can't remember writing, and the White Sox. The 4 choices in there. Segura would be. I mean, he's a good second baseman. he would be
Hmm.
slightly worse defensively than what we already had and just gave away when we did not take his option, which I think was just so stupid with Josh Harrison, and a better hitter. Although Josh from
Yeah,
June
yeah,
for
exactly.
Josh had two terrible months. The last 4 months, he may have been the best hitter on the team. Three of them, he was over 300, and the other one, his OPS was a high 700.
I think
Very well.
Josh. I think I actually really like Gene Segura a lot. I've liked him since he came up. I've liked him since he was a Brewer. Liked him in Seattle. Liked him in Philadelphia. I I think he's a great ball player. I like his energy. I think it makes no sense whatsoever to not pick up Josh Harrison's option at what, 5 million, 5.5?
Well, the differential between what they had to pay him anyway for the buyout and what the option was about 4.5. It was less than five, just
Yeah,
over four.
see, I don't. If you're going to sign Segura, if they're predicting, what were you saying, 2 years, about 18 million?
218, yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I'm betting it's higher. I bet that Segura gets paid more than that.
I think that's quite possible. And I'm not saying Gene doesn't deserve that. He's obviously proven himself as a great ball player, but it would make zero sense to me for the White Sox to release Josh Harrison at from a $5.5 million a year and then pay Gene Segura 9 million. It just it makes no sense. They're
The
very
same age,
comparable
basically.
players. Yeah,
Yeah.
very similar in age, very similar in style of play. Segura has been overall the better player through his career, but I would call them extremely comparable at this point in terms of what they can do on any given day. I think Segura ultimately will stay in Philadelphia, potentially even at a discounted rate. Um, I just don't understand. I really like Segura. If we can get Segura to fill that void, I'm fine with that. But it does not give us the actual great solution, which is signing one of those shortstops and moving Tim to second. Basically, signing Segura gives you a good second baseman and an okay, pretty good shortstop, and that's just where you are again.
And finally, at number 48, before we run out of the top 50, uh, Corey Kluber. Just 1 year and $12 million on a maybe he can come back kind of thing. KC, Red Sox, Atlanta, White Sox. I'm guessing if the White Sox hit anybody out of this list, it'll be Quintana. And I think that's a good pickup.
It's possible. It's possible it could be Quintana. I just think honestly that Quintana had too good of a 2022 for the White Sox to sign him for 2023. I think he's just gonna. I think someone else who has more money is gonna swoop in and take him because his 2022 was so solid. I mean, he started it playing for the Pirates and pitching against the NL Central, so we gotta kind of keep that in mind. But I would be kind of surprised if there's a world where the White Sox are able to get Quintana. I think someone else will sign him and overpay him, and I
Speaking
don't
of the
think we're going to
overpaid,
do that.
the one out of the whole top 50 list who has gone is Montero. And their prediction was 3 years, 24 million. In fact, it was 3 years and 34 and a half.
That's
So,
insane. That's insane. That's a terrible contract.
well,
Houston
the
is
the
not
relief
known for
pitching
these things,
contracts after Diaz's, I mean, they're suddenly
right? Oh yeah,
roof.
the market has gone way up. Now our bullpen's starting to look affordable now. I like Montero a lot. I think he's fascinating. He's a really fascinating, like, got really good late in his career story. Uh, three 3 years averaging over 11 million a year for Montero. I mean, whew, that is that is a danger zone. Ceiling is high, but the floor is really low. I could not have offered him that kind of money, even though I do really like him.
A couple of other lists, uh, some I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with, a couple of top 25 lists of bloggers type thing in the Sox world for 25 that never got mentioned. Uh, Sports Illustrated wrote on, incidentally, is number 7 on their list. They have, this is scary from a White Sox point of view, Wilson Contreras going to Cleveland. And I think that's very possible. He's going to demand a lot of money, but they've got a lot of money available. The MLBTR list had JD Martinez as half of them. 2 of them said JD Martinez, and Cleveland does need a designated hitter. There's no
Yeah.
question. Now, the one interesting thing on Sports Illustrated, and I think this is a tremendous pickup, their number 13, Andrew Benintendi, to predict to go to the White Sox.
Really?
I don't think it's going to happen. I
Me
don't
either.
think they'll pay the money because I
No.
think he's going to be
He's
at
going to be
least-
overpaid for sure.
at least a very high 5 figures.
Yes.
At least.
100%. 100%. He is going to be intensely overpaid. No doubt about it.
They have Jose Abreu going to the Astros.
Oh,
Elvis Andrus, who's their number 35, going to the Twins. A lot of the other predictions have one of the big shortstops going to the Twins. And they have their number 45, Johnny Cueto, returning to the White Sox.
I could see Cueto returning to the White Sox.
Yeah, I could see it too.
I could see
Especially
that.
if you don't get somebody like Quintana.
However, if the clubhouse environment is as bad as
And he
people
didn't
said
like it.
was,
He obviously did not like it at all.
correct.
He said
Only
several
thing,
times that things were wrong. He didn't
Yep.
point to it. It's in the clubhouse and it's in the guys. But he was just, even after La Russa was gone, he was indicating things are wrong.
there is one guy who will be able to get some of these guys, and it all depends on him, and that's Pedro Grifol. If he can, if someone like Johnny Cueto loves him, loves his style, they would have had overlap in Kansas City. So I think there's some possibility there of being buds, right? I think Cueto was in Kansas City, or maybe I'm just picturing Cueto pitching against Kansas City in the World Series. But I think it will come down to Grifol to sort of keep some of these guys or be able to bring in some of these guys. If he can't recruit, if he can't show a proven change of culture, because clearly around the whole league, everyone knows about how bad it was. And so you're not going to have a lot of guys who are itching to get to the south side of Chicago right now, especially for any sort of reasonable. I think going to play for the White Sox right now comes with a premium. I honestly do. I think if you're going to take $5 million somewhere else, you're going to have to take $6 million from the White Sox, unless Grifol can prove that there's a huge culture shift and he actually reaches out to guys and talks to them.
Hahn is still talking about we're not going to go free agents. Fair enough. That's typical. But it's trades when we have almost nobody to trade. Because even the good players, I mean, Luis Robert or Tim or Eloy, you trade them, you got nothing. I mean, you trade Luis Robert, you could get a really good trade for Luis Robert. Then you have no center fielder and no outfielders at all.
We have the trade chips to do a complete rebuild. We do. If we want to just say we're done, then you trade Cease, you trade Robert, trade Eloy, trade Tim, and you've got a future team somewhere in there, theoretically, because you would get a haul for some of those guys. But we are also still in our win now window.
Yeah.
So saying that we're going to play bad baseball for 10 years, not a good time for that. I truly don't know what's going to happen. I think we're going to end up with mostly the exact same team.
Without our best hitter.
Exactly. Yeah. And clubhouse leader.
And our second best pitcher up this year.
Correct. Yeah. So my hopes.
And our best defender.
My hopes in terms of things going better for the White Sox relies completely on coaching staff. I think we're going to see a lot of the same guys. So it's not going to be so much about what do the new White Sox look like. It's going to be what do the old White Sox look like under a guy who seems to care about baseball still? And that goes a long way. So I'm not saying it doesn't mean the White Sox won't be contenders, but I do think the change in the team is going to have to come from pieces that are already there, getting their act together and learning how to play baseball again.
Fangraphs said they're very, 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 very preliminary look at next year. Maybe Steamer, I'm not sure who they use for that. Has the White Sox third in the AL Central with a 501 percentage, which I think is impossible. So they're back to a 500 percentage. That's just the computer speak, 501 percentage.
Yeah.
But has them back basically the same as this year. So that's not optimistic, but
Yeah,
what are they?
but yeah, the factors
They
we're talking about though,
they just
aren't
invented a
applied.
bad stance. Don't talk to
Exactly.
them.
Exactly. All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign off here?
No, but there's still hope. There's still hope that good things are going to happen. It's just starting. I don't think much will happen for the next couple of weeks, but we'll see.
But it could. It could. I mean, signings are happening already, including some big deals. Looking at you, Diaz. So I think it's possible this is going to move a little quicker than we've seen it move in the past. But that is all the time we have for today. Somewhat hopeful outlook for the White Sox. Somewhat not hopeful outlook, but we will keep outlooking as we move toward the 2023 season. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time here on Sharing Sox.